Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are covering the weekly meta breakdown for the Timeless Best of One format, looking at the best decks in Timeless up to Mythic rank. So we'll give you kind of a lay of the land in terms of the metagame of this format. We'll do this, we already did for Timeless Best of 3, so it's a separate video if you want to check it out. We do for all the formats on Arena as frequently as data is available. Typically, we hope and try to get out the content at least once a week for your consumption purposes. So great resource if you want to just keep a trend in terms of what's happening in the metagame, new decks kind of coming out, and innovation to existing deck lists. We get the data from Untapped GG, what you see on the screen. Tracks your win rates, aggregates with other users. You can see on the left-hand side, they started tracking like Mythic winners, just in terms of their win rates, the decks they use. So another resource, you can take a look there. Link is in video description for Untapped if you want to get set up with them. And then I'll paste all these deck lists, timestamp them, the whole jazz. You can find all the deck lists here. So we're going to start off with looking at popularity of the decks, and then we'll look in terms of the win rates of the decks themselves and kind of go from there. As a friendly reminder, we're trying to hit 15,000 subs on the channel by the end of June. We are midway through 12,000, so if you haven't subbed, if you enjoy this content, hit that sub button. It's free, easy, helps the channel. And as always, likes and comments do go a long way to help support. So, popularity of the day. As always, popular deck doesn't necessarily correlate to the highest win rate deck. It can, but correlation is not causation. Rakdos Reanimator is the show and tell deck. It's huge kind of win rate here in Best of One. It is a deck that is very good at being a linear combo that can win turn 3, turn 4 fairly consistently. We have Rakdos Burn at 18%. We have a number of Reanimator shells that we'll be taking a look at, making about 14% of the meta. Rakdos Storm, which is the breach decks, about 7.5%, and then Mono Red Burn at 5%. Largely, you'll see in the Best of One format, decks like Jund, stuff like that kind of get pushed out. It's harder to navigate on an axis of needing like a turn 1 fatal push versus like a Thoughtseize in certain matchups, right? You keep a handful of Thoughtseize against Burn, sucks. Keep a handful of fatal push against the show and tell deck, sucks. So you usually see those decks better equipped in the Best of 3 meta. So as we kind of pop over 19,000 matches played of Best of One from April 25th through the 2nd, notably, we had the ladder reset that took place as well. So all the Mythic folks are now down in Platinum. So we kind of get the race going again to Mythic. So highest win rate deck happens to also be the most played deck, which is a little bit of an issue, I think, but we have show and tell at 75%. And the big kind of additions that we see, Mana Drain in the slot here. So 2 of Mana Drain. Cutting down, if we look, I guess some of the Lorien revealed would be kind of some of the trims. Still seeing the full Born of the Winds package. This version's playing like no interaction in terms of like creatures. It's just trying to execute its game plan. So how it generally works is you do show and tell, you put into play Omniscience. Omniscience then lets you cast a bunch of stuff for free from your deck. Ideally, you're trying to dig to Mastermind's Acquisition. Mastermind's Acquisition gets the Approach the Second Sun. Cast Approach Second Sun, then you play any of your cards that just dig you deeper in your deck. Atraxa, dig through time, stuff of that nature. You could also just show and tell in an Atraxa, and against some decks that's good enough to win that way there. You protect your combo with things like Thoughtseize, Veil of Summer, Born Upon the Wind lets you combo at instant speed, and it's a very resilient deck. You can rebuy certain effects with Mystic Sanctuary. You're using the Surveil lands to help you trim the top of your deck to find the key cards for your combo. It's a very linear, consistent combo that will win. I personally this seems to me like a deck I would play like 2 or 3 times, do the thing, and then I would get bored of it. You can tell from just my collection, I'm missing 12 cards, 12 rare mythic wild cards to complete this deck. It's not really something I'm personally interested in my playstyle, but I know a lot of people enjoy playing these kind of big mana combo decks that do the flashy thing. Deck more my speed, Rakdos Burn, 71%, and we're seeing a couple copies of the Slick Shot Show Off. My favorite card from Thunder Junction, make its way into the deck. So this lets you have an additional threat. It's evasive, pumps out huge amounts of damage. Seeing 2 Ragavans come to trim down as that, as well as just the 2 Play with Fires. This version's also on 20 lands. I will say this mana base is terrible. I'm gonna link another Rakdos mana base probably to fix this up. So I'll fix this up in the comments. This mana base is awful. like Forbidding Ruins is not mana that you'd be playing in it, but goes to show that burn spells are strong. But the core of the deck is just using cheap burn, bump the night, lightning bolt, play with fire. You got Whirling Vortex, which against Omniscience decks really punishes them. Bowmasters kind of come down and mess up the draws. Skewers, and then some light up the stage thanks to the spectacle. But most notable thing, if you're looking at the mana base here, you should be playing fetch lands that work well with DRC. You should be playing like Blood Crypt. You should be playing probably one Den of the Bugbear, depending on how many you go with. But there are ways to kind of fix up this mana base. One thing to note, Whirling Vortex is a symmetrical effect. If you have a Whirling Vortex out, you cast Mishra's Bauble, you will take 5 damage. You may die. So be mindful of that when you're playing the deck itself. In terms of Rakdos Storm, so this was 71%. And this kind of deck, what you're trying to do is self-mill yourself. Or just kind of play a bunch of cheap spells, use a Surveil, fill your graveyard. So either Stitcher Suppliers, Dragon Rage, you can Diabolic Intent the Stitcher to put more cards into your graveyard. You're going to cast Underworld Breach and then start chaining together Dark Rituals, turning over like your deck, eventually tutor for Tendrils of Agony and kill your opponent that way, or just like naturally mill it over in that respect. We did see in the best of 3 video, if you're interested in kind of a hybrid, there was a version that had trimmed down on some of the like Ragavans and the bolts and stuff, and they were playing 4 Reanimate and I think 3 Atraxas. So they had the backdoor Atraxa combo as well, just to reanimate. Reanimate's also not terrible even with your cheap creatures, just bringing back something like Dragon Rage Chandler, 1 mana regrowth, bring back to play, only lose a life. It's pretty good value, all things considered. Then go to the first of our Reanimator decks, 65% for mono black. So this is a kind of hybrid. It's got the Sorin, Vein Ripper, creature kind of turn 1 Dark Ritual approach. You can also leverage things like turn 1 Dark Ritual, Collective Brutality, discard one of your big things, Reanimate lines. So there's a few lines that kind of take advantage of an early Dark Ritual. So you can do a lot of busted stuff on turn 1. This version is also playing from the big score, the Harvester of Misery, so kind of a mini Massacre Worm. What's kind of cool with this is it can enable its own discard effect, so similar to like Troll of Khazad-dûm, which you can cycle. You can do the same with the Shadow or the Harvester of Misery. While you're not drawing a card, it can be early removal that you can then reanimate and kind of sweep the board that way there, which is kind of nice. Otherwise, just typical mono black stuff, Thoughtseizes, Deathrite Shamans. You have the green lands to kind of play with the Deathrite Shaman's abilities there as well. We then go to, so they're calling it 4-color Reanimators, this 4-color show and tell non-combo version. Really, this is blue-white show and tell control. So this has the similar lines of show and tell, Omniscience, Atraxa, but it doesn't win the game on the spot. Instead, it's playing a control game that your win condition is the Atraxa. And then the rest of the deck is just things like One Ring for card advantage. You have Tashanas Tidebinder. You have Stifle effects. So you're kind of eating away at your opponent's resources. They fetch, you can stifle it, kind of burn them that way there. Mana drains, you can like counter the early spell, get an early One Ring, kind of play to that avenue. So interesting kind of build. It's more control focused, doesn't win on the spot. Personally, I think if you're going to go through the efforts of playing this type of strategy, just playing show and tell likely seems better. Just if you're going like just win the game that turn. Why you're going to drag it out like another 10 turns. But if you want to get, you know, as many counter spells and stifles and big brain plays as you want, this might be the deck for you. We then move to Dimir Control. So Solaris Companion, 62%. Another deck that can likely take advantage of mana drain here. So I would just start substituting like lapses into counter spells, play the mana drain. Another thing that you'll see in the best of 3 video, it hasn't kind of made its way to best of 1 yet, but a lot of these lists now are playing 2 to 3 of the new 2-mana Jace and 2 Valkyries. They're like Tybalts, whatever you want to call them, and you can basically plot away the Tybalt or the Valky side, the creature side, and then cast the Planeswalker side for free. So they're kind of playing that package to cheat it into play. You have like mana drains and those ones as well, but this is a deck that's just got a lot of cheap counter spells, cheap disruption, and then it's looking to win with like Bowmasters. This one's got Snapcasters or like the Jace Valky combo as well. Then go to another Reanimator style strategy. This is 5 color. Again, they're calling it 5 color. This one's Rakdos Reanimator. So I have a video up on this one here. To be honest, I found this deck, we went 4 and 4. I felt it was very mid. You can have very explosive turns. You have the same turn 1 package of Ritual, Sorin, Bane Ripper. I had a game where I turned 2 Reanimated Atraxa and then lost because my opponent was on the play and they just Breach Stormed me. It has very little counterplay to show and tell other than the Thought Seizes. It's not as fast, I would say, against the, like, unless you have turn 1 Ripper, it's hard to kind of outrace show and tell. It does do some cool stuff. One of the cool things is with Olivia Crimson Bride, it can reanimate another creature. So you could kind of cheat into play Olivia and then bring back something else. Insolent Neonate's fine, not great, but happens to be a vampire. I think largely I would be playing Stitcher Supplier, just more consistent ways to fill your graveyard as well. But if you want to see this deck in action before crafting anything, like, I have a video on it, almost like an hour of gameplay. You can kind of get a feel for the deck itself. But I found like people were doing more busted stuff more consistently. And the last deck is Izzet Phoenix, so 57%. Big thing here is just kind of hoping to dodge Boatmasters, but you got cheap removal in the form of Lightning Bolts, Unholy Heats, a bunch of cheap kind of counters, and then just drawing cards, throwing Phoenix in the yard, trying to reanimate them that way there. Treasure Cruise has Ancestral Recall in this deck, try to draw you a bunch of cards in that respect. With this list here, you can also play a Genganta Companion. It's free to play, so that's something you should add as well. So that's it for the week. Nothing like super innovative right now. There's a Esper Stoneblade. We were seeing more of it in best of 3, to be honest. If you're even just looking for like deck ideas with newer cards, check out the best of 3 video as well, because it seems like people are brewing a little bit more in the best of 3 format than the best of 1 format right now. In any case, appreciate you watching. Hope you have a great one and stay safe out there.